You felt it before you understood it. The way their eyes stayed on you just a second too long. And now you're here, wondering if something this wrong could ever feel this right. Listen carefully, because most men will lie to themselves at this exact moment. They'll either romanticize it into a fantasy or suppress it out of fear. But what you're dealing with isn't simple attraction. It's psychological tension. It's emotional gravity. And when there's a massive age gap involved, that gravity becomes dangerous if you don't understand it. When someone significantly older or younger falls in love with you, it's rarely just about you. That's the first truth most men struggle to accept. You are not just a person in their eyes. You are a symbol, a reflection of something they feel they've lost, missed, or never had. For an older woman, you might represent youth, energy, a second chance at desire without emotional baggage. For a younger woman, you might represent stability, safety, direction, something solid in a chaotic world. And here's where it gets uncomfortable, because part of you enjoys that. You enjoy being seen as more mature, more exciting, more grounding. It feeds something deep inside you, something primal. But if you don't separate who you are from what you represent, you will lose control of the situation. Attraction across a large age gap is rarely balanced. One person is almost always projecting, and the other is unconsciously performing. You think you're just being yourself, but you're not. You're stepping into a role they've already written for you. That's why it feels intense so quickly. That's why conversations go deeper, faster. That's why the emotional connection feels almost addictive. Because it's not growing naturally, it's accelerating artificially. Now understand this. Intensity is not the same as compatibility. A woman can feel deeply drawn to you, crave your presence, even believe she's in love, and still not be aligned with you in the ways that actually sustain a relationship. Values, life stage, priorities. These don't disappear just because emotions are strong. In fact, strong emotions often blind you to those differences. And this is where most men make their first critical mistake. They chase the feeling instead of studying the dynamic. You start thinking, this must mean something. Of course it means something, but not necessarily what you think. It might mean she feels safe with you in a way she hasn't felt in years. It might mean she's escaping something in her own life. It might mean you're the easiest place for her emotions to land right now. And for you, it might mean validation. It might mean excitement. It might mean you finally feel chosen in a way you've been craving. But none of that automatically translates into something sustainable. Here's the deeper layer most people never talk about. Power. In age gap attraction, power doesn't always sit where you think it does. Sometimes the younger man feels in control because he has youth, options, and energy. Sometimes the older woman feels in control because she has experience, emotional intelligence, and clarity. But real power is hidden in who is more emotionally invested, and that can shift quickly. The moment you start needing her attention more than she needs yours, you lose leverage. The moment she feels like she's risking more than you are, she pulls back. So what you're feeling right now, this confusion, this pull, this quiet excitement mixed with doubt, it's not random. It's your intuition trying to warn you while your emotions try to override it. You don't need to run from this, but you absolutely cannot walk into it blindly. Because the truth is, relationships like this don't fail because of the age difference alone. They fail because the man never understands what's really happening beneath the surface. And if you don't understand it, you will misread her, misjudge the situation, and eventually lose both the connection and your sense of control within it. You think she chose you because of who you are. But what if she chose you because of when you appeared in her life? Timing is the silent force behind most age gap connections. It doesn't announce itself, but it shapes everything. A woman doesn't just fall for a man, she falls for what he represents at a very specific moment in her emotional timeline. If she's older, you might have entered her world right when she was questioning her desirability, her relevance, her sense of excitement. And then you show up, present, attentive, alive, and suddenly she feels something she thought had faded. You didn't create that feeling, you triggered it. And that distinction matters more than you realize. Because if you believe you created it, you'll feel responsible for maintaining it. You'll start trying to perform, to impress, to hold on to that version of yourself she responded to. And slowly, without noticing, you stop being grounded and start becoming reactive. Now flip the perspective. If she's younger, her attraction toward you might come from a search for stability, guidance, or emotional safety. You become a figure she can lean into, someone who feels certain in a world that often feels uncertain. But here's the danger. When someone leans too much, they stop standing on their own, and that creates pressure. Because now you're not just a man she's attracted to, you're a role she depends on. And the moment you slip, hesitate, or show inconsistency, it doesn't just affect attraction, it shakes her sense of security. This is where emotional imbalance begins to grow. You might feel like things are going well on the surface. Conversations are deep, connection feels strong, there's a sense of us against the world. But underneath that, there are silent expectations forming. Expectations you didn't agree to. Expectations she may not even be fully aware of. And when those expectations aren't met, confusion turns into tension. Now here's something most men completely miss. Attraction in these dynamics often thrives on contrast. The difference in age, experience, perspective, it creates a kind of polarity that feels exciting. But over time, that same difference can become friction. What once felt intriguing can start to feel incompatible. The way you approach problems, different. The way you see the future, different. The pace at which you want to move, different. And if you haven't grounded yourself in who you are, you'll start adjusting. You'll bend your preferences, your boundaries, your direction, just to keep the connection smooth. But every adjustment comes at a cost. You lose clarity, you lose consistency, and eventually, you lose attraction. Because here's the paradox. The very thing that attracted her to you is the thing you start to abandon when you try too hard to keep her. And she feels that shift, even if she can't explain it. Her energy changes, her responses become less certain. The emotional intensity that once felt effortless now feels unpredictable. And you start asking yourself, what changed? But the better question is, when did I change? Because in these situations, the man who maintains his center, the one who understands his values, his direction, and his limits, is the one who keeps the dynamic healthy. Not perfect, but stable. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It means becoming aware. Aware of when you're being pulled into a role that isn't truly yours. Aware of when emotions are moving faster than reality. Aware of when you're starting to seek validation instead of connection. And most importantly, aware of the difference between being desired and being needed. Because being needed can feel powerful, but it often leads to dependency, and dependency slowly erodes genuine attraction. So if you're in this situation right now, understand this. It's not about whether the age gap is right or wrong. It's about whether the connection is real, or simply a reflection of two people trying to fill something missing in themselves through each other. And if you don't take the time to see that clearly, you won't just lose her, you'll lose yourself in the process. What you're feeling right now isn't just attraction, it's attachment forming under pressure. And pressure changes people. When emotions move fast, your brain starts skipping steps. You stop observing and start assuming. You assume her feelings are stable. You assume the connection is deeper than it's been tested. You assume that because it feels rare, it must be real in a lasting way. But intensity has a way of disguising uncertainty. This is where emotional attachment becomes dangerous, not because it's wrong, but because it's premature. In age gap dynamics, attachment often builds unevenly. One person invests emotionally faster, while the other is still exploring what this even means. And that gap, emotional pacing, creates silent tension. You might not see it at first. Everything seems aligned. The conversations are meaningful. There's vulnerability, curiosity, even moments that feel almost cinematic. But underneath that, there's a question neither of you is fully answering. Where is this actually going? And instead of answering it directly, both of you keep feeding the connection, hoping clarity will come later. But clarity doesn't come from time alone. It comes from reality. Here's what most men avoid confronting: long-term alignment. Not feelings, not chemistry, alignment. Where are you in life right now? Where is she? What do your next 5 years actually look like? Because eventually those timelines collide. If she's older, she may already have a defined life structure, career, responsibilities, expectations about stability. You might still be building, exploring, evolving. And while that difference feels exciting at first, it can create pressure later. Pressure to grow faster than you're ready. Pressure to commit before you're certain. Pressure to become someone you're still figuring out. If she's younger, the dynamic shifts differently. She may still be discovering herself, changing rapidly, redefining what she wants. And while she may feel deeply connected to you now, her future self might not want the same things. And that's not betrayal, that's evolution. But if you attach too quickly, you won't see that clearly. You'll interpret change as rejection. You'll take her growth personally. And that's where emotional instability begins. Now listen closely, because this is where most men lose control completely. They start trying to secure the connection. More attention, more reassurance, more effort. They think if they give more, they'll stabilize what feels uncertain. But it does the opposite. It exposes neediness. It shifts the balance. It tells her, without words, that you're no longer grounded, that you're seeking something from her instead of sharing something with her. And attraction doesn't grow in that environment. It tightens, it questions, it pulls back. Not because she stopped caring, but because the dynamic changed. You moved from being centered to being dependent. And dependency, no matter how subtle, erodes desire. So what's the alternative? You slow it down, not by playing games, but by returning to awareness. You stop trying to define the connection too quickly. You stop building a future in your mind that hasn't been lived yet. You allow space for reality to reveal itself instead of forcing certainty. And most importantly, you observe her consistency. Not what she says in emotional moments, but how she shows up over time. Does her interest remain steady or fluctuate with her mood? Does she invest equally or only when it feels good for her? Does she respect your pace or try to pull you into hers? These answers matter more than any intense conversation or emotional confession. Because real connection isn't proven in moments of passion, it's proven in patterns of behavior. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll start to see whether this is something stable or something temporary that just feels powerful right now. You don't need to reject the connection, but you do need to stop idealizing it, because the moment you place it above your own clarity, you give away the one thing that keeps you grounded, your ability to see things as they are, not as you hope them to be. And once that's gone, you're no longer choosing the connection. You're being carried by it. At some point, this stops being about her and starts becoming a test of you. Not your charm, not your ability to attract, your judgment. Because what feels powerful right now can quietly become something that drains you if you don't decide who you are inside this dynamic. Most men wait too long to make that decision. They drift, they adapt, they let the connection define the pace, the tone, the emotional weight. And by the time they realize something feels off, they're already invested. That's why you need to ask yourself something most men avoid. If nothing about her changes, would I still choose this? Not the fantasy, not the potential, not the emotional highs. Her as she is. The reality of your age difference, the life paths that may never fully align. Because love, real love, isn't just about how strongly you feel. It's about what you're willing to sustain. And sustainability requires clarity. If you're constantly questioning where you stand, that's not clarity. If you feel like you have to prove your worth, that's not stability. If you're adjusting yourself just to keep her close, that's not connection. That's imbalance. Now here's the truth that most people won't say out loud. Sometimes someone can genuinely fall in love with you and still not be right for your life. Those two things can exist at the same time. And that's what makes this so difficult. Because walking away from something toxic is easy to justify. Walking away from something that feels meaningful but misaligned requires strength most men haven't developed yet. You have to choose long-term peace over short-term intensity, and that choice will test your discipline. If you stay, you need to stay with awareness, not blind hope, not emotional dependency. You set boundaries, not to control her, but to protect your direction. You maintain your life, your goals, your growth, your identity outside of her. You don't let the relationship become your center. It becomes a part of your life, not the whole of it. Because the moment it becomes your whole world, you lose perspective. And when you lose perspective, you lose power. But if you decide to step back or even walk away, understand this. You're not rejecting her. You're choosing alignment. You're choosing a life that fits you fully, not just emotionally, but practically, mentally, and long-term. And that's not weakness, that's maturity. Now here's what I want you to do. Something simple, but brutally honest. I want you to answer this in your own mind first, and then write it in the comments. What am I actually chasing here? Her, or how she makes me feel about myself? Be honest, because that answer will tell you everything. If this made you see your situation differently, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who's caught in a connection they don't fully understand. Some truths are uncomfortable, but they're exactly what sets you free.